Hello and welcome to In the Hyperloop. My name is Blake. Today we're going to really talk about just one subject, and that's the latest news from HARDT Hyperloop. They released a really important study of their technology in the Netherlands in connecting to other countries. So before we do so, we're going to talk about the Hard Tech Fund is still going to be organizing a conference later this summer, and it's a symposium, and they want to help contribute to the development of the Hyperloop. So it's an online research symposium. They're still accepting papers and still accepting feedback in this form. The key date of submitting interest has passed, but please do so still. They're really interested. You don't have to submit a paper in order to participate in the conference, but it's encouraged. And the symposium dates is all virtual on July 25th or 26th. And then August 10th and 20th, there'll be siloed testing periods to see any results gained from highlights in the conference. So I'd highly recommend you go over to hardtechfund.com and then click on involvement and Hyperloop. Really interesting team that's putting it together. One of the business leads for UC Davis Hyperloop, who participated in a number of Hyperloop pod competitions, as well as I'm helping organize by spreading the word of this conference. So I'd highly recommend you check it out and take part. I think it'll be really fun, especially that all of these other events in 2020 have been canceled. So if you have any interest, please fill out the form or email info@hardtechfund.com. So now let's get into the main topic today. And this was a press release as I get back to my page. New research, Hyperloop has huge impact, economic impact on Amsterdam metropolitan area. Basically, this will be kind of a back and forth discussion. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them in the chat. But this press release was added 9/4, just a couple days ago. And it's really interesting because this is by far the most put together Hyperloop company beyond Hyperloop TT and Virgin Hyperloop One and Transpod. This is, I think, HARDT's first major release of their feasibility study, and it's really interesting in that it's made a lot of news. Even Elon Musk, let's just kind of go over to Elon Musk's Twitter account and let's check this out. He was tweeting about this news reports in particular, and we're just going to kind of look through this. Of course, Elon Musk is working on a lot of other things right now. So he mentioned on a reply to a Clean Technica article, the Netherlands considering the Hyperloop, and one of his followers said the idea that we're throwing 90 billion pounds to HS2, which is the high-speed rail in the UK, and it's going to take 20 years and will be slower than China's high-speed rail, which is already 8 years old, facepalm. And Elon Musk says 100% tragedy. And I believe he also liked another article about this feasibility study, and I am not able to find it, but I will kind of go back and I'm going to look at this. So pardon me, I think, yeah, so it was basically that help article. Oh, and The Guardian. And really he's kind of pushing back on HS2 and, liked an article from this other guy. So, it's really interesting. HARDT Hyperloop has really caught the attention of Elon Musk because also HARDT Hyperloop was founded out of the team members of Delft Hyperloop, and they have a tremendous amount of experience every year at the SpaceX Pod competition. So there's a lot of communication and technology transfer. This is the actual presentation that we're going to look at a little bit later. It's in a PDF form on issue, so we're going to check that out in a little bit. But to kind of tee it off, we're going to read the press release because that's actually a lot of good, juicy background material. And so this is going to be kind of a long episode of me reading from these press releases and the PowerPoints and the actual PDF. But new research, Hyperloop has huge economic impact on Amsterdam metropolitan area. And innovative solutions such as Hyperloop offers agglomeration benefits on account of its enabling quick and efficient international links over land and reducing travel times from hours to just minutes. The realization of Hyperloop strengthens the position of Amsterdam Metropolitan Area, MRA, by continuing economic areas such as the German Ruhr Valley. This is the result of a study conducted by HARDT Hyperloop in collaboration with the province of Northern Holland. Several development perspectives have been explored in the MRA for 2040. 4 perspective outlooks developed scenarios in the Amsterdam metropolitan area in the future. One of the perspective focuses of the compact metropolis, and in turn, the accessibility and connectivity of both national and international economic clusters. Alongside this study, Noord-Holland and HART also evaluated the role of Hyperloop as an innovative and sustainable solution for the MRA. Amsterdam is such a powerhouse in the Netherlands that, it's good to know. Let me know if oh, that's good. Thanks, Jorg. Yeah, it looks good. Big Delft fan. And I think everybody's a big Delft fan. They've had great marketing for all of the SpaceX Pod competition teams. And honestly, HARDT Hyperloop really raises the bar quite a bit in terms of their total branding and packaging. Also, their openness to work with others. And it's been really fun watching their events live. They've done, and we had their founder on InTheHyperloop as one of my first interviews, so it's been really fun. So yeah. So yeah, we're just going to kind of continue reading on this press release. So linking the Amsterdam metropolitan area to Europe, the realization of the Hyperloop would help bring about the creation of the new daily urban system. And this is a new kind of term I think HART has coined, in which cities and regions are connected to one another on both a national and international level. Within the Netherlands, the connections from Amsterdam to Groningen and Amsterdam to The Hague were studied on an international level. The study focused on connections with Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, and Paris. This highlights the fact that Hyperloop could play an important role in not only linking the MRA to the rest of the Netherlands, but the whole of Europe as well. Stefan Margs, project manager of HARDT Hyperloop, a Hyperloop connection between Amsterdam and Eindhoven just takes 15 minutes, and Düsseldorf can reach in less than half an hour. The perspective of home and work distances will be radically altered. So Amsterdam to Eindhoven, 15 minutes, Düsseldorf in less than half an hour. And Jorg also comments on this video, and always great technical solutions so far at the pod competition, but not so fast as War. We had high hopes. We had high hopes as well for the last pod competition. And I think they just kind of got unlucky. Basically, it all kind of came down to a little bit of perhaps luck at the end of the competition. But yeah, really, really exciting. And they had great live streaming as well, and really good banter, which I think livens the whole attention of the event as well. But alongside home and travel, the impact of the Hyperloop on short-haul flights was also examined, oops, and I missed a sentence. The perspective, yes, the Hyperloop is essentially perfect for international connections, and a connection from Amsterdam to Eindhoven would be a logical component of international connection between Amsterdam, the Ruhr Valley, and Berlin. And we're going to be looking at a really good map over here in just a bit after we look at this press release. The economic impact of Hyperloop: improved accessibility would lead to agglomeration of benefits that would strengthen the spatial economic business climate, given the borders would quite literally become blurred. The implementation of Hyperloop would in turn have a huge economic impact and strengthen the economic value of the province. The potential size of the working age population would be considerably expanded if Amsterdam was connected to Groningen. The Hague, and particularly regions such as the Ruhr Valley. The Hyperloop would create a compact region of cities on the 5 routes, all within 1 hour. Door-to-door travel distance would equate to an additional GDP of 275 billion euros for the province, i.e. a growth of 121%. That's remarkable. And I think Delft Hyperloop, as well as HARDT, have always, done a really good job of trying to make Hyperloop really simple and explaining it in really simple terms. But now we're seeing, economic benefits being stated, so that's good. So next steps. Jorgen Olaf, Deputy Mobility of the province of Noord-Holland. We know that people are willing to travel for a maximum of 1 hour to their work. With high-speed Hyperloop, you would be able to cover much greater distances in that time. This sounds very promising. That is why we would engage in discussions with other authorities about this to progress this research. HARDT is now exploring the possibilities of further deepening this research. Important aspects included not only technical developments, but also elements such as safety, which is so important. This technology and transportation is always, not going to succeed if it crashes. So, and also, in every construction project, whether it's very small or super big mega projects, OSHA, occupational safety, is super important, and I'm really glad that they're highlighting this as well. Public adoption, integration, and social economic impact are also really important. And I think particularly Delft and HARDT Hyperloop have always done a really good job of seeing how this would fit in the social economic role in the Netherlands by one of the first actually competitions right after Hyperloop was announced in 2013 was Connect.nl, a transportation group in the Netherlands that's tasked with envisioning future transportation. They had their own Hyperloop competition where they asked the entire country to submit proposals on what cities to connect and what things to connect. And there was 4 winning ideas. One of them would connect the cities. The other one would connect hospitals and universities. And then the other one I kind of forgot. But yeah, so they have been crowdsourcing ideas for the country for a long time. So that's great. It is very important to involve public, private, and international parties in order to collectively bring this realization of Hyperloop closer. And a little bit about HARDT, but HARDT is a European technology company specializing in Hyperloop, with its headquarters situated in the Netherlands. Hyperloop is promising innovations that are faster and more energy efficient than both airplanes and high-speed trains. Hyperloop meets the growing demand of sustainable and affordable high-speed transportation of freight and people. And we're going to be learning a lot about the cargo loop that HARDT Hyperloop has been talking about. The company was founded after winning the International Hyperloop competition organized by Elon Musk. And I'm just making sure one thing. Yep, and HARDT Hyperloop is initiator of the European Hyperloop Center, a test center envisioned to open in the Dutch province of Groningen in 2022. Partners of HARDT Hyperloop are, among others, Schiphol, which is the airport, NS, which I think is the National Railway line, Deutsche Bahn, which is the German railway, Kulian Industries, which I kind of forgot what they are, Energy, Feingeist, BAM, which is I think a construction company, Tata Steel, and IHC. For information, go to their website. So just quickly, we're going to, and let us know if you have any other questions in the chat. We're going to look at this really cool PDF that they also released. I like it because it not only gives us the scope of this kind of investigation, but also it gives us a lot of other information. So let's just kind of zoom in and start looking at this. So the role of Hyperloop on the development perspective, compact metropole. And I think this compact metropole is kind of going back to what they were saying in the press release of having the Amsterdam metropolitan area look at solutions and study how development scenarios for this area by the year 2040. So accessibility, connectivity, substitution, and decongestion. Hyperloop accessibility would significantly reduce the overall door-to-door travel time between the greater metropolitan region of Amsterdam and cities along the 5 routes. The improved travel time expands and redefines the existing metropolitan system beyond Dutch borders within 60 minutes of travel. So Hyperloop is in yellow, aviation is kind of in this gray, and rail is in green. Well, there's no airplane flights between Amsterdam to Groningen, and that would be 50 minutes. And train or rail is a lot longer than that. So we're just going to look over here. And I think Groningen is over here, up in the north. MRA to Düsseldorf, 58 minutes, or 170 minutes in flying, or 230 minutes by train. And Düsseldorf is over here. So yeah, that's quite a distance actually. And then Frankfurt, which I think is kind of the holy grail of connections, along with Paris and The Hague, 83 minutes by Hyperloop, 185 minutes by aviation, and 270 by rail. And that's definitely a major destination, I would think. So measuring door-to-door travel time, first mile, 15 minutes to get to the terminal departure, and then the Hyperloop trip, less than 30 minutes daily commuting trips, and less than 60 minutes for Paris and Frankfurt, and then arrival, then another 15 minutes. So that's how they're considering, I think, this these minutes. So that's not too bad. Frankfurt would be just a major important city to connect. And then Paris is 90 minutes, with aviation is about 200 minutes, and then rail about 210 minutes. So that's really interesting. I've taken that train ride, and it's a very high-speed rail. It's very easy. There are a couple of stops, I think, but it's would be just crazy cool to be there in 90 minutes. That's unbelievable, and using pretty much zero emissions. So let's just look at this. The routes, you see that, and how many minutes that would take. The metropolitan Amsterdam region is probably in a circle of less than 40 minutes. 40-minute door-to-door travel times eliminated benefits. And then this is about 60 minutes door-to-door trips, creates a new daily urban system. That's their new definition. So Brussels and Düsseldorf would be totally within that daily urban system. And 90 minutes door-to-door substitute for short-haul flights. So that's great. Next is connectivity. The improvement of accessibility by Hyperloop on the 5 routes could create agglomeration of benefits and strengths. the city pair strengthens the city pair competitiveness. The connectivity would be improved by a larger reach of working population within 60 minutes door to door. Also, a Hyperloop connection would connect markets of significant economic value. So, reach working age populations within 60 minutes. And these are within millions of people. So currently it's about 0.8 million people, but with Hyperloop you reach 1.2 million people. And so you're just seeing quite a bit of growth in how many more people and you can reach when you have such a fast travel times. And reach within GDP per billion. So we see Route 1, Route 2, Route 3. Is this reference which routes we're talking about? Oh yeah, so routes 1, 2, 3. So let's really look at the Frankfurt route. I guess that would be Route 3. Yeah, Frankfurt. The Route 3 in billions, $322 billion. Paris would be $460 billion in those markets. So that's quite impressive. And then finally, substitution and decongestion. Amsterdam Airport Schiphol has a strong position as an international hub for the greater metropolitan area of Amsterdam. The WLO forecast projects a restricted growth of 60% passengers for 2040, equivalent to 4.3 million passengers on routes connecting international airport in Brussels, Paris, Düsseldorf, and Frankfurt. And Jorg also says, wouldn't it be exciting to have the first Hyperloop here in Europe? Yes, I 100% agree. It's really important that we see this technology get built safely, and having a European standard in a Hyperloop would set such a strong message to other countries because of the high quality of standardization in Europe. So, which would be perfect for our rising alternative energy efforts here. Yep. Also, as flights inside Europe, and this is Jorg's giving us an update in chat, have so much overheard with checking in overhead, which would make it a thing of hours to reach so many different countries here. Europe is pretty much destined for Hyperloop. I 100% agree. There can only be so many airplanes in the sky, and you get, I think, a lot more bandwidth for your buck for these kind of short distance routes for that airplanes normally fly to. Indeed. Thanks. Yep, so we've pretty much substitution of short-haul flights to Hyperloop would aid in the airport decongestion of passengers between a total of 3 to 3.6 million passengers, equivalent to 20 to 24,000 aircraft movements in 2040. That's incredible, and that's just 20 years from now. That's a lot of airplane flights, 20 to 24,000 aircraft movements. So now we're just going to get into the main Hyperloop presentation, and we're just going to make this full screen. So this is a lot. It's about 50 pages, but I would just like to highlight that the vision, a world where distance does not matter. The mission is on-demand, affordable, high-speed transportation for everyone. And this is proprietary and confidential, so hopefully that's fine. And there's a lot of forward-looking statements, of course, that involve a number of risks and uncertainties, including statements regarding the outlook of the company's business and results on operations. By nature, these risks or uncertainties would cause actual results to differ. So just, it's a forward-looking statement. So version 2.11. So there have been other versions, and it was released on the 3rd, March 9th. So And we see the authors of the project team. Now, these first two pages are kind of interesting because they're in Dutch, and I unfortunately don't speak Dutch, but it gives kind of a overview of what this is and for the local Dutch, I think, groups where they submitted this. But I'd really like this kind of hard to see infographic, and it really gives a good overview of where HARDT Hyperloop has come. So in 2017, they built a full-scale low-speed test track, and they proved levitation, propulsion, and guidance in a low-pressure environment. And then in 2019, they that was at the end of 2019. And then by 2022, they want to build a cargo-scale high-speed pod. HARDT will prove all Hyperloop technologies at 700 kilometers an hour at a 3-kilometer test facility, the European Hyperloop Center. And that's really interesting. We haven't seen too many other companies talk about cargo except for Hyperloop One, DP World, and then also a small company called Magway in the UK with their kind of small box-like containers that would levitate like a Hyperloop pod. So it's kind of using a little bit of levitation. I don't know if those very small diameter tubes would be unpressurized, but yeah, we'll see. And then Hyperloop TT has kind of said, cargo, but they haven't released any renders of their cargo pods. So it's really, and Transpod does have renders of like shipping aircraft pallets that would fit into their Hyperloop system. And then I don't think Zelaros has, so it's really just between HARDT Hyperloop talking about cargo loops and Hyperloop One, basically. 2025 commercial cargo route. The first commercial route will be a small-scale cargo-only solution transporting high-value, time-sensitive goods, but from one area to another. And then they'll expand to cover major global trade routes and distribute goods within maximum duplication of stock in local processes. And by 2025, they're going to have a passenger certification for Hyperloop. And the first passenger route will be phased through a 10 to 15 kilometer truck for certification, subsequently extending to an operational commercial route. So phase 1 is 10 to 15, phase 2 is 52 kilometer route. And then by 2028, they want to start expanding routes into the European network for a socially and economically and territorially cohesive union. So that's really cool. And they have a little bit about the cargo loop here. Just saying, it would be kind of the first step in eventually having a passenger Hyperloop. But yeah, so there we go. My Dutch is pretty bad. So we're going to look now at kind of the contents, and they go into the background, Hyperloop in a nutshell, Hyperloop compared with other high-speed modalities, Hyperloop contributing to international policy objectives, Hyperloop on routes of the development perspective, safety of the province, sensitivity, of the province goals to the intervention, workshop results, deduction of the objectives of the 4 themes, summary, impact assessment, accessibility, connectivity, substitution, decongestion, a roadmap to commercialization, and summary of sessions and objectives. So yeah, and so this is a lot. As part of the Hyperloop implementation program, the province of Noord-Holland and HARDT Hyperloop collaboratively conducted an exploratory study of the possibilities with this compact metropole is exploring a number of perspectives to address future challenges in connecting Amsterdam in 2040. Focusing on maximizing connectivity of the metropolitan area with international economic powerhouses. Within this perspective, fast and reliable international connections over high-speed rail are key to substituting short-haul flights. So they're kind of basing this off of a 2050 thinking, so they're really planning ahead 30 years. With this perspective, the Amsterdam metropolitan area increasingly functions as a single city to increase the agglomeration benefits. The metropolis in development describes the increasing agglomeration of power by developing a cohesive, internationally competitive metropolitan system. This urban system of larger and smaller cores with Amsterdam as the city center and a landscape with high usage of experience value, a multimodal accessibility, a port with energy transitions, and circular economy as carriers and Skypole as an international hub. So the metropolitan development is good for the economy, perspectivity, and international competitiveness of the Netherlands, but involves major challenges. One of the critical success factors to managing the growth of traffic in the metropolis is required investments in all transport networks. So they want to improve all of the transportation. Apart from studying existing modes of transportation, the province wants to explore the role of an impact of Hyperloop in the development perspective. The primary objective of this project is to provide the province of Noord-Holland a first indication of the impacts of Hyperloop on certain socioeconomic themes. The concept study assesses the potential of Hyperloop on the routes in the development perspective. The aim of this study is what could be the role of Hyperloop in a compact metropole development perspective. So it's a pipeline outcome framework describes the chain of events that comes after an intervention and leads to a final impact. See Figure 2. This approach is widely used in the field of economics and development. When the scope of the study and the availability of data are limited, it will allow to combine qualitative assessments of objective indicators and qualitative techniques like expert workshop sessions. The idea is to evaluate a point in the chain of impact as close as possible for the final long-term impact, while keeping consistently with the methodological possibilities. The single difference is a technique of qualitative impact evaluation that calculates the difference between two states, the state without an intervention and the state with the intervention. To fully claim that this cause is a difference in intervention, the chain of impacts from the intervention to the long-term impacts must be identified and validated previously, hence the need for an expert validation of the pipeline. So there we go. The study was conducted in 5 steps, including qualitative and quantitative techniques of evaluation. First, it identified proposed impact pipeline of significant investments in infrastructure of transportation derived from previous empirical evidence and literature of regional development. Second, the proposed pipeline and a preliminary qualitative assessment were presented and validated in an expert work session with policymakers, experts in public transportation, and HARDT specialists. See work session notes. Third, the medium level impacts were qualitative estimates by calculating the single differences in 4 key factors of the pipeline with other current modes of transportation in a scenario where everything remains as it is today. Fourth, the results were presented in a final workshop session for qualitative validation discussion. Finally, the study reported to the conclusions of the impact evolution. So the thematic effects, competitiveness, transportation network quality, and sustainable climate. And those are kind of out of the scope of this study, but the impacts, so the intervention is a transportation physical infrastructure. The key characteristics are reducing travel times, low consumption, and high capacity. The impacts are accessibility, connectivity, substitution, and decongestion. So we're just going to kind of skim this a little bit. And yeah, I think we pretty much, so the expected outcomes of the study must be interpreted as an order of magnitude rather than a fixed estimation. The basic scenario, where everything remains as today, is the most common reference point to this type of analysis because the known represents the most certain one. Alternative scenarios were not discussed in this study. However, the results can guide future analysis and help to frame likely future scenarios. For example, scenarios where environmental and political pressure are tougher on carbon emissions on current modes of transportation, or scenarios where the current modes of transportation use technology to improve cost efficiency. In any case, sustainable socioeconomic impacts of Hyperloop or any other scaled intervention in the field of transportation will depend not only on the capacity to outperform the current options, but on international environments ready to nudge and canalize the impact by providing several set of policy measures. While that discussion is, of course, out of scope for the study brings elements to take in consideration. So we're just going to kind of skip ahead. Hyperloop. So here we go. The Hyperloop is a new mode of transportation for large volumes of passengers and cargo. The infrastructure consists of tubes that can be built above ground. Vehicles that resemble small aircraft travel inside the tube, neither separately or in short trains coupled vehicles. Hyperloop in a nutshell. The Hyperloop system is a combination of existing technologies. Instead of rail technologies as wheels on tracks, the system uses magnetic forces for levitation, guidance, and propulsion. Air resistance and noise emissions becoming a major factor with increased seat speed. Hyperloop system solves this by operating pressurized vehicles inside a low-pressure tube. The low-pressure environment reduces the air resistance and energy. I see more people have joined the viewership, so thanks for joining. Let us know if you have any questions. I'm just reading this report, basically. It's going to be pretty simple, and I think my video camera is all messed up. It's been kind of blurry or something. I don't know. It's not working. But the Hyperloop infrastructure comprises parallel tubes that are either elevated on columns above ground, on level ground, or underground. And I think Elon Musk said, how about burying this? But it can be done above ground to a tweet regarding this study. The two tubes allow vehicles to travel in opposite directions. So this is really great. I am loving this. I wish this was a little bit bigger. But you see an actual person inside the tube and solar panels. The height of this is 5 meters, with the maximum height of the tube is 8.6 meters. On pillars, they'll steel tracks for guidance, levitation, and propulsion, linear motor. You have cargo in the front. And then you have stiffening rings, low pressure tubes, 6 rows per door, or 1050 millimeter seat pitch. So you can kind of test that out in your lawn chair. And life support, and I see a WC, so hope that there's a bathroom in this. Otherwise, that would be unfortunate, but we're glad to see that there's life support. Vehicle specifications: max cruise speed of 100 kilometers per hour, longitudinal acceleration 0.15 Gs, that's not much. Lateral acceleration 0.1 G, so it's very smooth. Capacity is about 60 PAX, I'm not exactly sure what that is. Length 34 meters, diameter 2.7 meters. So we might have to go out into the street and measure this out and kind of simulate how long these pods would be. And that's kind of everything we know. Whoops. characteristics. And this is really cool. This demonstration of low-speed test facility for the first prototype of lane switch. That was just an incredible event to watch and see the Hyperloop pod go very slowly, but then change and go down a different path. We haven't seen any other Hyperloop company do that. So Hyperloop has the following key characteristics: up to 20,000 passengers per hour per direction at 700 kilometers an hour, or 40,000 passengers with trains of coupled vehicles. High transit speed at about 500 kilometers per hour to 1,000 kilometers per hour. Low energy consumption, 38 WH passengers per kilometer, watts per passenger per kilometer at 700 kilometers an hour. Low maintenance, magnetic levitation and propulsion without friction, and switching without moving components, minimize wear and tear. Zero operating emissions, this is amazing. Electric powertrain by renewable energy sources produce zero operational emissions. Minimal infrastructure footprint. The small footprint of elevated infrastructure allows the Hyperloop to follow existing infrastructure and reach integrated with transport hubs. So, Hyperloop compared with other high-speed rail modalities, aviation, high-speed rail, maglev, and HARDT Hyperloop. We're just going to kind of focus on HARDT Hyperloop. I think so. The green are the pros. Yellow are kind of not cons, but kind of bad things, and then the red is definitely bad things. So HARDT needs a departure interval of 30 seconds. That's amazing. It does need a small footprint. Capacity per lane, 10,000 per passengers per hour on a single runway. High-speed rail is 7 to 30,000 passengers per hour. Maglev is 7,000 to 30,000 passengers per hour. And HARDT Hyperloop fills an incredible niche of 14,000 to 54,000 passengers per hour. Wow. That's a lot of people. Energy efficiency, Hyperloop has by far the most energy efficient and fastest, with aviation being a lot of people, but not very energy efficient. And cost effectiveness high for airports, low for high-speed rail. Maglev is medium, 35, and HARDT Hyperloop is saying they're about medium at 30 million kilometers 30 million euros per kilometer, and low maintenance costs. They're the only ones with low maintenance. Of course, Hyperloop is protected by a tube, and distance between destinations, you can go 50 to 200 kilometers. 2,000 kilometers. So that's incredible. So very short, local, or very, very long. So that's great. It's very concise. So Hyperloop contributing to international policy objectives. Hyperloop shows strong signs of sustainability to the national and international policy agendas about CO2 emission reduction. And they're really singling out aviation, trying to achieve 2050 decarbonization goals. Hyperloop has the potential to offer an alternative to short-haul flights within Europe due to its speed. Further, Hyperloop has a low energy consumption powered by sustainable means. So really, the history of Hyperloop and NL. Whoops. Sorry, go ahead. The introduction of Hyperloop concept aids in modernizing the transportation industry. Several studies have been conducted to this young and dynamic concept. And here are the studies. In 2016, a rebel group was commissioned by the Ministry of infrastructure and environment to carry out pre-feasibility study of Hyperloop Knowledge Center, a test track, and a commercial line. 17 test locations were assessed, and the Dutch business interests were mapped out. In the spring of 2017, a consortium led by TNO carried out the first series of public feasibility studies into the potential of a Hyperloop test facility in Flevoland. In beginning of 2018, HARDT conducted a preliminary study to Hyperloop in the Amsterdam-Frankfurt route together. And Jorg says, I think the comparison to flights is the most interesting, and on this Hyperloop beats them in almost every category. That's amazing. I would agree. I mean, I don't know when electric airplanes are going to take off, but really that's kind of the only time I see airplanes having the upper edge over Hyperloop. If all of a sudden massive airplanes could be all electric, and yeah, that would be great. I'm a big airplane fan, by the way, so it's ironic that I like Hyperloop. But going back to this, yeah. In September 2018, Royal Schiphol Group announced to execute a pre-feasibility study of Hyperloop together with HARDT. And I don't know if we have seen that. I don't think that this is this report. That's great. Hyperloop on the routes of the development perspective. Okay, so Jorg says electric airplanes are really interesting, but more for the medium range. Okay, that's really good to know, actually. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. And I mean, any day now, please build an all-electric airplane, anybody. But I don't know if it's going to happen anytime soon. If the Hyperloop will be commercialized in the Netherlands in the coming decade, this will be materializing in the first. And Jorg says, I mean, about 200 to 500 kilometers and over cities, etc. Yeah. Let me just see. We're on page 16, 17. And the routes, we don't really know the route length. Yeah, I was just kind of thinking of like how long these routes were. But yeah, I would assume medium distance. Would be anything beyond Paris, basically. Yeah, and that would probably be uncomfortable to be in a Hyperloop pod longer than 90 minutes, I guess. I mean, you're in an airplane for a lot longer, but yeah, at that time, if you have to go to maybe other cities, it might be a little easier. So yeah, going back to the report. Linium from Munich looks great. Okay, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so thanks, Jorg, for keeping us and watching. Let us know if you have further questions. So the route descriptions, well, we've kind of talked about all of these different routes, but this really gets down to if you're a local living in one of these cities. So Amsterdam to The Hague, the national route between the administrative capital and The Hague and Amsterdam. And they're kind of just giving out. So this is kind of interesting. Amsterdam to Düsseldorf. The route follows the international rail connection to the Ruhr Valley area, and which Hyperloop acts as a public transportation system. Amsterdam to Groningen, you just connect that. Amsterdam to Paris, the route would follow the HSL Zuid rail connection and serves as a public transportation system as an alternative for short-haul flights. For the assessment of Hyperloop, for the potential 4 scale factors, regional, national, international, and continental. Regional defined as a connection between cities of 50 kilometers, the potential of this first Hyperloop route. National defines as the potential network spanning all the regions in the Netherlands. International defined as the international network with connections to northwestern European cities and airports. Continental defined as the envisioned by the EU Hyperloop network. So yeah, that's Linium to Munich would definitely be international. Yeah, or I don't know, maybe that would be considered continental at that time. But that's cool. And yeah, I do see this map. I guess Bavaria and southern Germany and the rest of France would be considered continental. So, um, and that would be envisioned as the EU-wide Hyperloop network. So that's cool. And going back to the local, um, the scope of the regional development perspective, proposed routes 1 and 5 are relevant to the national scale, whereas 2 and 3 and 4 are relevant to both national and international scale. Route 1 and 5 Hyperloop is a high-speed public transportation system. Route 2, 3, 4 Hyperloop is a public transportation system and fast international transportation. The origin station at MRA for the study is situated in Amsterdam South. Um, and this is a pretty long document, and we're already at about minute 50. So let us know if you think I'm going to kind of gloss over this a little bit. But there's a lot of good knowledge, so I would highly recommend you check it out yourself. And really, this is fascinating how they decide where the stations are. Zuid is the international business center of this Enter NL core corridor, and the spirit of the objective of the compact metropole, maximizing connectivity of the metropolitan area with international economic powerhouses. The Hyperloop would have to be connected in the business district to increase the integration of MRA on local, national, international transportation networks. So they're not going to put the station out in the suburbs. It's going to be downtown in the middle of Zuidas. Direct connections. HARDT Hyperloop's lane switching technology enables direct connections to each of the cities along a route to form and to the MRA. On the longer routes, vehicles travel directly to Brussels and Paris or directly to Rotterdam or Eindhoven. This technology allows the Hyperloop system to act as a public transportation system, as a fast international transportation system, the alternative to short-haul flights and high-speed rail. So yeah, you can really line up all the airports, which would be great to kind of, as we see, Route 1 and 2 are pretty much just, out and back, but 3 and 4 do kind of have this loop, and 5 is kind of out and back to Groningen. It should be emphasized that the assumptions of station location and the list of possible routes, as well as the selected route for impact analysis in this report, should in no way be interpreted as a complete feasibility study, blah, blah, blah. This is, of course, requires further focused research. That's funny. And I'm sure a lot of real estate investors are interested in this kind of feasibility study, because this will perhaps greatly affect real estate prices. Time comparison for each of the connected routes. And of course, we have travel time in Hyperloop, travel time in aviation, and a kind of a gray, travel time in rail, which is a green, and then travel time in car, which is a darker green, and Hyperloop is in red. So, or in orange, I'm sorry. So yeah, travel times, Hyperloop is somewhat comparable sometimes to the car, I believe. But it beats out, for that Groningen route number 5, it's definitely kind of comparable to vehicle on the shorter lengths. Paris, it wins handily on route number 2. Yeah, Amsterdam to Rotterdam would be very quick, either in Hyperloop or in a car and public rail time. So yeah, but it's these big routes. The big differences like Brussels, Paris, Eindhoven, maybe Düsseldorf, Frankfurt, Duisburg, Düsseldorf, and Groningen. That would just be a really good place to have Hyperloop. So they used Google Maps to determine travel time by car. That's how I do it, and it's kind of fascinating. If you use Google Maps, at different times of the day, it's going to give you different times. So I wonder what time they used Google Maps to make the estimation. Because, if you use it during rush hour, it's going to perhaps take even longer than what Google Maps will say. So I would take the car times as a grain of salt because it can take even longer if you're in rush hour. And same with air. If you leave at 6 in the morning, it's probably on time. But if you leave at 6 p.m. at night, it's probably going to be a delayed departure. So yeah, sensitivity of the province goals to the intervention. So following from the above and by means of a work session in the province, the assessment defined objectives of the province as well as the kind of blah, blah, blah. Okay, workshop results. The workshop session with the province results the following key objectives: maintaining an accessible region, improving daily urban systems of transportation, increasing competitiveness, maintaining the connection of Amsterdam Schiphol Airport, and sustainable transportation, increasing spatial sustainability, and increasing the overall quality of life. So we're just going to kind of look at this. It's a little hard to read, but their different routes are color-coded. So let's look at the Hague route, which is route number 1 in kind of the light green. Paris is in a darker green, and Frankfurt is in the orange, and Düsseldorf is in black. So interestingly, it gets kind of low marks. So lowest impact is accessible region, but where it gets kind of higher and medium high is the daily urban system, especially for Frankfurt and Paris. Competitiveness of the region, especially for Frankfurt and Paris. Connectivity to airports is Frankfurt, Paris, and Düsseldorf, which is high. And then sustainable transportation and quality of life, all of the routes, of course. So that's good. And then deduction of objectives to the 4 themes. We're just going to kind of scan this over. Accessibility. In the literature, the definition of accessibility to the region can be defined as potential for interaction. This is influenced by the characteristics of transport systems that incorporates travel time and cost toward the destination and land use. Consequently, there is a connection between both features. Accessibility can also be related to the economic, environmental, and social objectives, such as access to jobs for workers and access to skilled labor force for the company perspectives. Accessibility is measured by the travel time reduction and an increased willingness to travel from cities and routes on the routes to and from the greater Amsterdam region. Connectivity. Connectivity refers to the quality of connection of different masses of people and businesses. It is used to describe irregular relations in a compact way, and it is a derivative of accessibility. So the connectivity is based on the gross number of inhabitants within the community, accepted travel times to and from Amsterdam. This usually does not exceed 60 minutes, so it's really fast to get in and out of Amsterdam, of which the in-vehicle time is generalized to 30 minutes, and the first and last mile to about 30 minutes. The number of inhabitants within the reach serves as a proxy for the access to the labor and consumer markets. Connectivity is measured as the total value added in terms of working age population and different travel times. Substitution, I didn't really quite get what substitution means. The study defines substitution as the expected market share that Hyperloop would be able to shift from other current modes of transportation on routes. Substitution follows from the reduced travel times and the low energy consumption. Low energy consumption results from a smaller GHG footprint, creating a more sustainable means of transportation. For the substitution, the study calculated that the probability of choosing Hyperloop as a function of the value time and assumptions of the price, elasticities, and current preferences. So that's kind of hard to understand. The substitution effect was estimated mainly for the international routes. towards Paris and Frankfurt, because really you're not going to be driving from Paris to Frankfurt very often, whereas you really might consider taking a Hyperloop, especially if it would cut down on the time that it would take to go to Paris and Frankfurt. Decongestion, presented as the additional capacity generated by Hyperloop on the route to potentially decongest railway, Amsterdam, and aviation, Amsterdam Schiphol. Oops, I think we went one page too far. Oh, no, we didn't. So that's it. Capacity in the Hyperloop system depends on several variables, like number of tubes, operational speed, safe headway distance between vehicles, number of seats in the vehicle, operating hours. And NASA just shared a video. Summary and overview, accessibility, connectivity, substitution, decongestion. Oopsies. So the panel validated the pipeline framework to approach the potential impact of Hyperloop on the development plans of the province after adding some changes. The participants agreed a Hyperloop system that would meet all the conceptual design characteristics would be likely to generate a significant impact in the long-term sustainable economic growth of the province. The several objectives of the province expected from improving transportation infrastructure defines what is called agglomeration benefits, blah, blah, blah. So we're just gonna impact assessment. Based on the four themes, the impact assessment of Hyperloop on the routes for the development perspective is conducted. For each theme, the implications of the route is described. So network and quality and travel time improvements. So door-to-door, we're just kind of skimming over this. So figure 8 illustrates the time travel savings of Hyperloop versus rail. On the international connections like Amsterdam, Paris, Amsterdam, Düsseldorf, and Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Hyperloop will create up to 75% travel time reduction when compared against rail, and up to 66% when comparing against aviation. On the national scale, however, the absolute in-minute travel time reduction is less obvious due to the short distances. Amsterdam, Groningen will benefit from a reduction of travel time of 66% compared against rail, while Amsterdam, The Hague will save 46%. Competing for travel times against car and domestic short routes will not add significant time savings. For example, on Route 1 to Leiden and Route 5 to Almer, the car remains to be faster, and we saw that too, which makes sense. But how many vehicles can you fit on the road? So travel time savings of Hyperloop compared to rail. So this is kind of that same summary that we've seen. Willingness to travel. This is a good point because some people don't really want to travel in not a car. Travel time between the two cities is a key indicator for the willingness of inhabitants to be prepared to travel between the two cities. On average, people look for a job within 38 kilometers of home. Yep. The longer the time to travel, the lower the willingness of people to travel both between the cities. Yeah, so we're just going to kind of skip over this. Hyperloop significantly improves the connection between city pairs, both on national and international routes. Positive exchanges. So they're using this daily urban system for these very short routes, but other routes approximately 40 minutes to form a little bit better. So comparison between rail and Hyperloop can be reviewed on the graph on the next page. So they're really focusing on rail and how rail is black and Hyperloop is green. And so yeah, Hyperloop is pretty much winning in all of them for increased competitive urban system, which is slightly larger than just the regional or the local. So working age population, we're going to kind of skip over it. Hyperloop is expected to increase the size of the working-age population by at least 35% when compared to domestic markets like Amsterdam and Groningen. On the international side, routes like Amsterdam, Brussels, Paris would add 183% in the first 60 minutes and 384% in the 90-minute full route. So the longer the routes, the better the population density, kind of. Hyperloop would increase the accessibility to working age population of 11 cities within 60 minutes of travel time. So this is kind of an interesting graph. So this is door-to-door time. And then Hyperloop would improve international accessibility of that greater Amsterdam region to 3 cities within 60 minutes travel time and 2 within 90 minutes. Wow. So potential door-to-door travel time in existing situation versus Hyperloop showing travel time reductions for the city pairs. It's kind of hard to understand this, but we'll move on. The reach of GDP, well, Hyperloop would connect significant markets. So measuring the GDP value of the Dutch cities on the 5 routes, a compact area of 1 hour time, Hyperloop would add 275 billion to the GDP, euros, to the GDP of the province, equivalent to 121%, which is massive. On the 3 international routes, Hyperloop would substitute for up to 85% of trips from Amsterdam to Paris, 82% of trips from Amsterdam to Frankfurt, and 71% from Amsterdam to Düsseldorf from aviation and high-speed rail, which is pretty insane. The potential of travel time reduction while keeping everything else constant is the main driver for a decision for a mode of transportation. So it's just amazing how much Hyperloop can really beat out aviation and even high-speed rail. And we're just going to kind of go down probability to choose Hyperloop. This is a fascinating part. Developed a theoretical model choice based on the utility of travel time. Under the perfect market competition for aviation, high-speed rail, and Hyperloop, the model is based on a set of factors to determine the probability of a passenger to choose one model over the other. Among the factors are value of time, operating speed, average access, and waiting to transfer. Figure 5 presents, on average, Hyperloop performing an average speed of 500 kilometers an hour and using the most popular routes in Europe is expected to derive an average of 62% of passengers from the total market of transportation. So about 64 people would rather choose a Hyperloop over aviation, and 41 would choose it over rail. In the case of Hyperloop performs an average speed of 700 kilometers, substitution would increase the market share to 85% would choose Hyperloop just because it takes a lot shorter time. Yeah, so that's great. And here we go. We have a diagram of how people would rather choose Hyperloop over the other modes of transportation based on speed. And so they're trying to find that sweet spot of how fast can the Hyperloop pod go. Decongestion, well, there's a lot of, I think, congestion out there. So yeah, similar, we're about halfway done through this report, so we're getting a little tired. It's already been an hour streaming. But the current use of capacity in peak hours in the crowded rail stations in North Holland can certainly accommodate by Hyperloop while adding up to 5 times more peak flow, allowing sustainable decongestion. So at peak hour, Amsterdam Central Station facilitates 15,000 passengers, equivalent to approximately 57% of the potential capacity of Hyperloop. Similarly, Schiphol Station in peak hours would use 30% of the capacity of Hyperloop, while Amsterdam Zuid South represents 18%. So that's incredible. They are determining that the capacity of Hyperloop system exceeds the aggregated travel demand of rail. That's incredible. So if you thought rail could be the answer, well, perhaps Hyperloop is for these long distance routes. Amsterdam Schiphol, which is so important. And let me just see if I skipped a page. Oh, I did. So substitution of short-haul flights to Hyperloop aids the decongestion of the airport, enabling the airport to focus on main port-related medium and long-distance connectivity. The table below represents passengers and aircraft movement between the airport and other airports. Our estimation indicates that Hyperloop would retain 70 to 85% of the combined market of aviation and high-speed rail. Would retain 70 to 85%. So that's pretty interesting. So yeah, definitely less airplane flights. The expected substitution of Hyperloop estimated between 75 and 85% of the routes from like Amsterdam to Paris, Amsterdam, Frankfurt, Amsterdam, and other would mean that you could have 3 to 3.6 million passengers less, or 20 to 24,000 aircrafts less if you use Hyperloop. So that's pretty crazy. And even so with Amsterdam, Frankfurt. So we're just going to kind of look at impact on regional and national scale. On the national scale, the length of the route plays an important role. Amsterdam to Groningen will benefit of the reduction of door-to-door travel time of 66% when compared against rail, while Amsterdam to The Hague will save 46%. Competing for travel times against car and domestic short routes will not add significant savings. On the routes, Hyperloop is expected to increase the reach of the working population. Hyperloop would connect markets of significant economic value, and that along the 4 routes or 5 routes, a compact area of 1 hour access time by Hyperloop would add 275 million euros to the GDP of the province, equivalent to 121% more than rail and aviation. So in response to the question from the province of Noord-Holland, HARDT reviewed whether Hyperloop also fulfills a function of the metropolitan public transportation network. Based on the impact assessment, Hyperloop would only be beneficial on shorter routes, plus or minus 50 kilometers, if it becomes part of a longer route. Routes with distances of 50 plus kilometers should be considered for the first commercial pilot, later to be expanded on international distances. So that's really important. Impact on international scale, Düsseldorf, Duisburg and Brussels could be reached within 60 minutes. And we're just, Schiphol and airplane travel is expected to grow. And so there's just a lot of opportunity for Hyperloop to help out. The roadmap to commercialization. The proposed roadmap allows the province to make several important no-regret moves in this short term with limited financial risk, and how to be ready for larger investments when the concept becomes more mature in the long term. However, in the view of the long preparation times and broad knowledge required for a complex infrastructure like Hyperloop, it is important to launch several concrete actions in the short term. So, innovation phase, realization phase, exploitation phase. And I think we're still kind of in the innovation phase. We're not at the realization phase yet. They built the low-speed test facility, and had that great public outreach for that. And it's operated since June 2019 and was developed by a whole bunch of people and groups. The next step is focus on the development of high-speed test facility to prove that Hyperloop can compete with aviation and speed on speed. No other Hyperloop company has measurable evidence for the promised high speed of Hyperloop over 700 kilometers yet. That is true. And despite what Hyperloop TT and Virgin Hyperloop 1, they've not tested their systems at high speed yet either. So that's good. In the realization phase, a short part, 15-kilometer of the route, will first be used to combine the knowledge gained in a full-scale system. The short route is to be extended to a commercial route between 2024 and 2028. The exploitation phase commences with the operational commercial route in 2028. Spin-off applications, and this is the cargo loop, which is really fun. They don't have a lot of information on this. They don't have any images. The most focus of the Hyperloop developments has been on combining passengers and cargo. Implementing Hyperloop will need kind of steps. A certification system for passengers, financing up to €1 billion for first Hyperloop route, and public acceptance. In order to deal with these steps, HARDT is currently investigating a small-scale cargo-only application of Hyperloop technologies, or the cargo loop. Cargo loop will be implemented earlier than Hyperloop for passengers because of less stringent safety requirements and lower investment. At the same time, having a commercial cargo network in place will help financiers, certification bodies, and end users with the acceptance of the Hyperloop as a new model of transportation. They'll be able to see the system working reliable and safe in operational environments, ensuring that they'll get more comfortable with the solutions, thereby decreasing perceived risk. So yeah, I think it's great. And it's going to validate HARDT's technologies at high speed, but also in the near finished cargo-only application of Hyperloop technologies, the high-speed test facility will be able to demonstrate the use of cargo loop transportation parcels at high speed. And it could fit in the accessible regions objectives of the province. Cargo loop connections between cities and hubs within the MRA and surrounding regions can offer decongestion by shifting time-sensitive goods such as parcels, perishables, flowers, groceries, and pharmaceuticals away from the road. And we also saw this with salmon in Norway. They want to ship salmon because they have to do it manually over the mountains with cars and stuff, and it's really scary. So yeah, here's the workshop summaries. We're not really going to get into this because they're all kind of laid out, but I'd highly recommend you do a deep dive. And I'm just kind of looking at the objectives. Oops. Yeah, so they worked on the themes. Cool maps. Accessible by public transport from Amsterdam South train station. This is kind of a cool map. Currently 45 minutes with public transportation, and then with Hyperloop it opens up other things. So we're seeing Hyperloop in the Hague, Rotterdam areas, yeah, which is quite amazing. So this greater area will just be one kind of mega city. So this is the Amsterdam, Rotterdam, Brussels, Paris route. This is the total labor market. So they have 3 different routes. Route 1 by air, Route 2 by rail, and yeah. So yeah. Then over here on this map, we see, it's kind of hard to see, but currently with public transportation at 45 minutes, you can only really get into this Amsterdam area. But if you, with Hyperloop in 45 minutes, you can get there, and then Hyperloop at 60 minutes, you can get all the way to Paris, and some other bits in Paris, which is amazing. Which is even further from London. Oh man, can you imagine building a Hyperloop tube underneath the channel, Amsterdam to London in under 45 minutes? Whoa. This is the Route 3, Amsterdam, Utrecht, Eindhoven, Düsseldorf. And we're just going to kind of, you can check this out later. Amsterdam to Düsseldorf again. Oh, that was Frankfurt. I'm sorry. Düsseldorf. Yeah. So yeah, this is kind of interesting. So Frankfurt can be reached within 90 minutes, 55% reduction compared to aviation. So that's amazing. Düsseldorf within 60 minutes of door-to-door travel. It strengthens the competitiveness of the city pairs. To Groningen, and this is, it was going to work really well for Groningen. Yeah, and thanks, Jorg. That would be neat, and maybe that would still be easier than connecting Italy with a tunnel. Yep, that's so true. That's fine. Where is that? And yeah, so that would be a good route to Groningen. And I'm sorry, I'm getting close to the webcam. And that seems to be about it. So we've kind of finished. It was a long tour, but we're really excited. We're now a lot more knowledgeable. We haven't heard a lot of details on the technology or building out any of the pods yet. And of course, they released this image that we've kind of seen of the pod, which kind of looks, I've always thought it looks like a Viking ship in the tube. But I'd highly recommend you give HARDT Hyperloop a shout, a follow. They're on all the social media platforms, and they're doing really well. And they've revamped their website to have these kind of horizontal areas. And they have the Hyperloop. What is the Hyperloop? Check out our 1-minute introduction, which is amazing. A clean alternative to short haul flights. Show the statistics, and this is kind of their high quality render of what a station might look like, and it just looks like you're entering an airplane. And I like how they have the wheelchair accessible sign right there and the time it takes. One of the fastest mode of transportations, and right off the beginning, it's really amazing. HARDT Hyperloop came out very strong, that they were competing against short haul and medium haul flights. And we never saw version Hyperloop 1 really doing that. That's really amazing. Smart autonomous vehicles through a network of safe tubes, fully controlled by smart technologies and the solar panels on top. Platform 7, the most convenient journey for the modern traveler. Yeah, and they're showing just airplane congestion, smog, interstate highways, crowding. And they link the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations to their work, which I don't see on any other website for Hyperloop companies. And then they have a lot about their technology, great photos. The stations, the renders of the stations and how amazing and futuristic this all looks, and bright and sunny. Yeah, just kind of less stressful than an airport. The Hyperloop vehicle, you can see what it looks like inside the vehicle. And thanks, Jorg, for all the feedback and stuff in chat. And if you guys have any other questions, feel free to ask next time we're streaming live. And sorry, we don't really have a set time on streaming live. And this is a nice aerial view of the Hyperloop tubes right next to old rail infrastructure. And I don't see solar panels on the rail lines. And then the European Hyperloop Center coming to you in 2020. So that's cool. And that's kind of it. We're researching the implementation of Hyperloop in your region, so reach out to us if you have any questions. And delivering one Hyperloop European standard for Hyperloop, that's true. And if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And it shows all their partnerships. And yeah, follow them. They have a Medium page as their blog. They have great newsletters, and give them a like on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, and they do have an Instagram page as well. So that kind of concludes it. Thank you all for joining us in probably the longest time we've ever streamed on YouTube. But this was just a really fascinating view. I think Elon Musk is supporting them tacitly with these tweets and comments, and kind of digging at HS2 in Europe or in England and how expensive that will be. So stay tuned, stay in the loop, and let us know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.